Birth of the Third Reich Chapter 1. On the very eve of the birth of the Third Reich, a feverish tension gripped Berlin. The Weimar Republic, it seemed obvious to almost everyone, was about to expire. For more than a year it had been fast crumbling. General Kurt von Schleicher, who like his immediate predecessor, Franz von Papen, cared little for the Republic and less for its democracy, and who, also like him, had ruled as Chancellor by presidential decree without recourse to Parliament, had come to the end of his rope after 57 days in office. On Saturday, January 28, 1933, he had been abruptly dismissed by the aging President of the Republic, Field Marshal von Hindenburg. Adolf Hitler, leader of the National Socialists, the largest political party in Germany, was demanding for himself the chancellorship of the Democratic Republic he had sworn to destroy. The wildest rumors of what might happen were rife in the capital that fateful winter weekend, and the most alarming of them, as it happened, were not without some foundation. There were reports that Schleicher, in collusion with General Kurt von Hammerstein, the commander-in-chief of the army, was preparing a putsch with the support of the Potsdam garrison for the purpose of arresting the president and establishing a military dictatorship. There was talk of a Nazi putsch. The Berlin storm troopers, aided by Nazi sympathizers in the police, were to seize the Wilhelmstrasse, where the president's palace and most of the government ministries were located. There was talk also of a general strike. On Sunday, January 29, 100,000 workers crowded into the Lustgarten in the center of Berlin to demonstrate their opposition to making Hitler chancellor. One of their leaders attempted to get in touch with General von Hammerstein to propose joint action by the army and organized labor. Should Hitler be named to head a new government? Once before, at the time of the Kapp Putsch in 1920, General Streik had saved the Republic after the government had fled the capital. Throughout most of the night from Sunday to Monday, Hitler paced up and down his room in the Kaiserhof Hotel on the Reichskanzlerplatz, just down the street from the Chancellery. Despite his nervousness, he was supremely confident that his hour had struck. For nearly a month he had been secretly negotiating with Papen and the other leaders of the conservative right. He had to compromise. He could not have a purely Nazi government, but he could be chancellor of a coalition government whose members, 8 out of 11 of whom were not Nazis, agreed with him on the abolition of the democratic Weimar regime. Only the aged, dour president had seemed to stand in his way. As recently as January 26, 2 days before the advent of this crucial weekend, the grisly old field marshal had told General von Hammerstein that he had no intention whatsoever of making that Austrian corporal either Minister of Defense or Chancellor of the Reich. Yet under the influence of his son, Major Oskar von Hindenburg, of Otto von Meissner, the state secretary to the president, of Papen and other members of the Palace Camarilla, the president was finally weakening. He was 86 and fading into senility. On the afternoon of Sunday, January 29, while Hitler was having coffee and cakes with Goebbels and other aides, Hermann Göring, president of the Reichstag and second to Hitler in the Nazi Party, burst in and informed them categorically that on the morrow Hitler would be named chancellor. Shortly before noon on Monday, January 30, 1933, Hitler drove over to the Chancellery for an interview with Hindenburg that was to prove fateful for himself, for Germany and for the rest of the world. From a window in the Kaiserhof, Goebbels, Röhm and other Nazi chiefs kept an anxious watch on the door of the Chancellery, where the Führer would shortly be coming out. We would see from his face whether he had succeeded or not, Goebbels noted. For even then they were not quite sure. Our hearts are torn back and forth between doubt, hope, joy and discouragement, Goebbels jotted down in his diary. We have been disappointed too often for us to believe wholeheartedly in the great miracle. A few moments later they witnessed the miracle. The man with the Charlie Chaplain Mustache, who had been a down-and-out tramp in Vienna in his youth. An unknown soldier of World War I, a derelict in Munich in the first grim post-war days, the somewhat comical leader of the beer hall putsch, this spellbinder who was not even German but Austrian, and who was only 43 years old, had just been administered the oath as Chancellor of the German Reich. He drove the 100 yards to the Kaiserhof and was soon with his old cronies. Goebbels, Göring, Röhm and the other brownshirts who had helped him along the rocky, brawling path to power. He says nothing, and all of us say nothing. Goebbels recorded, but his eyes are full of tears. That evening from dusk until far past midnight the delirious Nazi storm troopers marched in a massive torchlight parade to celebrate the victory. By the tens of thousands, they emerged in disciplined columns from the depths of the Tiergarten, passed under the triumphal arch of the Brandenburg Gate and down the Wilhelmstrasse, their bands blaring the old martial airs to the thunderous beating of the drums, their voices bawling the new Horst Wessel song and other tunes that were as old as Germany, their jackboots beating a mighty rhythm on the pavement, their torches held high and forming a ribbon of flame that illuminated the night and kindled the hurrahs of the onlookers massed on the sidewalks. From a window in the Palace Hindenburg looked down upon the marching throng, beating time to the military marches with his cane, apparently pleased that at last he had picked a chancellor who could arouse the people in a traditionally German way. Whether the old man, in his dotage, had any inkling of what he had unleashed that day is doubtful. A story, probably apocryphal, soon spread over Berlin that in the midst of the parade he had turned to an old general and said, "I didn't know we had taken so many Russian prisoners." A stone's throw down the Wilhelmstrasse Adolf Hitler stood at an open window of the chancellery, beside himself with excitement and joy, dancing up and down, jerking his arm up continually in the Nazi salute, smiling and laughing until his eyes were again full of tears. One foreign observer watched the proceedings that evening with different feelings. The river of fire flowed past the French embassy. André François Poncet, the ambassador, wrote, whence, with heavy heart and filled with foreboding, I watched its luminous wake. Tired but happy, Goebbels arrived home that night at 3 a.m. Scribbling in his diary before retiring, he wrote, "It is almost like a dream, a fairy tale. The new Reich has been born. 14 years of work have been crowned with victory. The German Revolution has begun. The Third Reich, which was born on January 30, 1933, Hitler boasted, would endure for 1,000 years, and in Nazi parlance it was often referred to as the 1,000-year Reich. It lasted 12 years and 4 months, but in that flicker of time, as history goes, it caused an eruption on this earth more violent and shattering than any previously experienced, raising the German people to heights of power they had not known in more than a millennium, making them at one time the masters of Europe from the Atlantic to the Volga, from the North Cape to the Mediterranean, and then plunging them to the depths of destruction and desolation at the end of a world war which their nation had cold-bloodedly provoked and during which it instituted a reign of terror over the conquered peoples which, in its calculated butchery of human life and the human spirit, outdid all the savage oppressions of the previous ages. The man who founded the Third Reich, who ruled it ruthlessly and often with uncommon shrewdness, who led it to such dizzy heights and to such a sorry end, was a person of undoubted, if evil, genius. It is true that he found in the German people, as a mysterious providence and centuries of experience had molded them up to that time, a natural instrument which he was able to shape to his own sinister ends. But without Adolf Hitler, who was possessed of a demonic personality, a granite will, uncanny instincts, a cold ruthlessness, a remarkable intellect, a soaring imagination and, until toward the end, when, drunk with power and success, he overreached himself, an amazing capacity to size up people and situations, there almost certainly would never have been a Third Reich. It is one of the great examples, as Friedrich Meinecke, the eminent German historian, said, of the singular and incalculable power of personality in historical life. To some Germans and, no doubt, to most foreigners it appeared that a charlatan had come to power in Berlin. To the majority of Germans Hitler had, or would shortly assume, the aura of a truly charismatic leader. They were to follow him blindly, as if he possessed a divine judgment, for the next 12 tempestuous years.